Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It is your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you with a bit of a solemn moment here in Knicks land, which is not something I ever thought I would be able to say from the second round of the playoffs, but life comes at you fast, as it were. Here with someone I'm very excited to talk to this game about and hopefully add some much needed context to the situation at large, while also paying respect to the depravity that we witnessed on Saturday afternoon. Owen, was it depraved? Jeremy Cohen, hello, sir. How are you?
Been better, John. I've been better. Yeah, this was a rough week for Knicks basketball. And I just want to know what the Knicks did in the 3 days leading up to game 3. Because it was embarrassing. The effort was so, as Clyde might put it, lackadaisical, that I didn't recognize that team. There was nothing about that team that sparked anything what we have seen in the past 2 months, 3 months, maybe even. So it was just disappointing to see them let go of the rope, but it wasn't even letting go of the rope because it never even felt like they were grabbing onto the rope in the first place for game 3. Just out the gate, it never led the entire game. It's just ugly.
It's a great analogy.
It's just awful. So the nice thing is the series isn't over. There's still game 4. You always are going to have to win 1 in Miami. So that's what the Knicks have to look forward to. But it's just would certainly like them to be in a different spot than they're in right now, that being 2-1. Nothing about how they played on Saturday. Nothing makes them deserve being up 2-1, though. It's just pathetic.
Yeah, and what makes it a little bit tougher is, I know for me, and we didn't speak after game 2, between game 2 and game 3, but I know after game 2, I was kind of pushing. Not that there was a lot of it, but in the post game after game 2, there was a certain amount of like negativity, amongst, the people in the chat and whatnot. And I was trying to push back against that because for the very simple reason of like, I don't know how else to put it. We're the Knicks, we shouldn't be taking second round playoff victories for granted. It's a thing that has happened 3 times in the last 23 years. Like the circumstances were, not as you would have wanted them, with Jimmy Butler injured, and even with Jimmy Butler injured, like they didn't exactly play like the best of games. But I was trying to put a positive spin on that, and then you take into larger account of how the playoffs at large. You look at other teams, look at other series. You never want to take anything for granted. So that was like very close in the rearview mirror to game 3, even though they did, as you say, have 3 days off. What they did with that time is a mystery, remains a mystery. And like it's been 24 hours about since game 3 ended, a little bit more than that, as we're sitting here recording this now on Sunday night. And like, I have so much flying through my head, and it could basically be grouped into 2 categories. There is the part of me that very much wants to stay grounded and stay like, keep looking at the bigger picture, and also remember to zoom out, and that playoff, I think me and you maybe especially, although you're very good at not falling into the moment, me maybe not as good, but I think we like to, as fans, attribute logic to all of this that we watch. And when you see a performance that is that bad in the ways that it was that bad, it's very difficult to like look at that and be like, this is a self-contained entity. We can leave this here, and it is not reflective of anything else. It is not reflective on any single player. It is not reflective of the coach. It is not reflective on us as a team. It does not change anything about that we've come to know about this team over the previous 88 game or 89. I'm good at math. 89 games. But like that's not how our mind works. Even as we look around, and look no further than today, Sunday, because the Philadelphia 76ers, after 2 days after they looked like they didn't belong in the same city as the Boston Celtics, let alone in the same building on the same court, like came out and won that game. Granted, it was a tighter game than it should have been. It was on their home court, but like things could change in a hurry in the NBA, especially in the NBA playoffs. And like it is possible to have one game that looks as bad as the game we just saw and turn around and it not mean anything. And I could say all that. It doesn't make the loss feel any better. And it doesn't make me necessarily feel better about this team right now as we're sitting here trying to talk about them and parse through some of the issues that we saw. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it's not a very comfortable place to be. And for sure as shit is not a place that I ever in a million years thought I would be if you had told me at any point during this year, let alone before the year, that I'd be sitting here having this conversation in the middle of the second round of the playoffs. That's the part that's like kind of most stunning.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, the Warriors lost by how many points to the Lakers?
The Lakers lost by 30 points. Yeah,
right. So, and this isn't more of a comparison. It's more just teams get blown out on the road frequently.
Yeah,
the Knicks were blown out in Cleveland. The benefit of that following game was we're coming back to New York, whereas this is okay. We still have to win one in Miami, and we'd really like to not have to have every single game be a do or die for us.
Yep.
So, that's the thing. I keep going back to the idea of, well, the Knicks cleaning the glass, second best offense in the NBA when you take out garbage time. The issue is that it was efficiency, and the Knicks have had poor efficiency. But then you look at Miami, and Miami has had crap efficiency for most of this series anyway. So it's almost, the Knicks did a much worse job on the offensive glass in game 3, but they did a great job in games 1 and 2. But Miami was also comfortable with them playing their game, so to speak. I was at game 2 and I felt nervous the entire time because obviously game 1, you could say, well, the Knicks are playing without Randle and they had Butler and whatever. And then game 2 was in the reverse. No team was at full strength. And yet I didn't feel great about the win after game 2. I was happy that it was a win. You take them, they still count as one, whether it's by a handful or by 30. It's the other stuff. It's the other part of it that needs to get cleaned up, which is just how do you tell a team that looked that flat to pick it up in Miami so that they don't go back down 3 games to 1. That'll be on coaching. That'll have to do with lineups. That's a lot of different things that we will get into.
Yeah, no, we can get into it right now. So Andrew always kind of sets up these shows with kind of a format, so to speak, about how we get into our discussion. And today, let me read the exact title. Blame Pie. That is our essay question. Blame Pie. Who belongs in the blame pie chart for the reasons the Knicks have fallen into a 2-1 hole, and how big are the slices? And I think that is certainly where the mindset of most people is at, and I don't think that that's incorrect. That there is blame to go around here. What's troubling to me is that who do you blame for a team that just comes out and seems like it is not ready for the moment, when that has been arguably, I say arguably because you could argue in a different direction, but I would say arguably the defining characteristic of this team for really, I would say, since Thibodeau got here. And obviously there are exceptions to the rule, although if you go back towards last year, which was as disastrous as it could be, the issue was more, I would say, losing big leads as opposed to coming out flat, although there were certainly times that they came out flat because the starting lineup just stunk, which is a whole separate Thibodeau issue that we are now back to revisiting. But it's just, again, it is so uncharacteristic of them to have come out in a way where it was just blatantly obvious that they were not as prepared to play this basketball game as the other team. And that, I mean, it has to fall on the players to a certain extent, but typically, like, you know, your coach gets you ready with the game plan. Your coach gets you ready to play. Your coach gets you ready to execute in a way that you feel confident. Like, if we do X, Y, and Z, this is going to work. It didn't seem like any of that was there, which is why, unsurprisingly, Andrew has Thibs listed as the first entry onto the possibility for the blame pie. And I haven't even gotten into the starting lineup change yet. I pushed back a lot against the Thibs stuff after the game, and I still feel like for certain reasons it's a little bit much. And at the same time, I keep going over and over in my head, like, man, regardless of what you think about the starting lineup change, and I think that that's like become this, like, not a red herring, because I think there's a lot of validity to it, but it's to me, it's distracting from the main issue, which is that they did not come out ready to play. And even with the lineup that they had, it did not seem like they came out with a game plan that was tailor fit to succeed with the lineup they had on the floor, to exploit, to emphasize the strengths of the lineup that they came out with, and to exploit the weaknesses that the Miami Heat presented to them. And that's what I can't escape at the end of the day.
So then wouldn't that mean that falls on Thibs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I can't.
No, I agree. Yes. It's tough for me because the lineup that got you here, the starting lineup that we know of, has now been scrapped. And it just feels like there's more of a focus on trying to stop Jimmy Butler than playing your own game. And your own game has gotten you to the point where you're here, right? It's not a fluke that the Knicks won, 47 games, that they beat the Cavs in 5. They did that with talent, and everything was working well, and it has been working well. So to go to this where, yes, Josh Hart did a great job on Jimmy Butler, I just don't, I've felt that Josh Hart is best suited in a role off the bench. He's not, to me, as a starter, and that's fine. It's not about a level of talent. It's about certain fit and how everything interacts. I don't love how he plays alongside RJ. It's not good. It's bad.
Can I throw a stat at you?
Please do.
So you probably know this one. They've already this 5-man unit, the current starting 5. We'll see if it's a starting 5 for Thursday. Thursday. When do they play? Monday. My God, I've lost all sense of time. They've already played 70 minutes in the playoffs together, which is by far the most of any 5-man unit. Do you want to take a guess how many minutes that 5-man unit played together in the regular season?
I'm going to say 12.
You're off. Wow. I don't know if you looked that up or if that's just a good guess.
No,
11.
Okay. Wow.
11 minutes together. And there's a reason why it only played 11 minutes together. And it's because, considering all of the assets the Knicks have at their disposal, to put those guys on the court together, it just feels clunky, you know? And yet at the same time, and I do want to at least acknowledge this, because I do think it is worth acknowledging, in an extraordinarily small sample size, the starting unit with Grimes in it in the playoffs had been struggling to score. And when I say extraordinarily small, it was 29 minutes. So nothing. The unit with Hart in place of Grimes had, going into the game on Saturday, had been scoring, I think, at about a 123 points per 100 possession clip, which is very good. I get all that. I appreciate all that. And I certainly appreciate what Josh Hart does. But I keep coming back to two things. And one is grounded in what you just said, which is like they're selling out to stop Jimmy Butler. And I said it after the post game, and I think it deserves repeating. It's what Benji said at the start of the series. Don't make the first adjustment. Make them make the first adjustment. Don't be reactionary before you have to be reactionary. You know, and I get there's a sense of, well, let's get ahead of the thing that we know is coming anyway. Well, you know, that's why I said it several times last night. It just feels like Thibs is just trying to outsmart himself. And while there may be logic to the decision, the results are now what the results are, and it's not good. So I don't know how you run from that.
And the Knicks, again, came out flat for game 3. Absolutely. I think we do also have to give credit to the Heat.
Oh, a lot of credit.
Right. Like, I know Knicks fans often might internalize it as what's going wrong. And there are things going wrong, but the Heat also have been doing a fantastic job. And the fact that they've been able to play this way, Kyle Lowry's resurgence without Tyler Hero, without Victor Oladipo. Like they've got players to stand up. And I know that Knicks fans are upset about calls. I have been upset about them. Heat fans have been upset about the calls. I think it's just been a very ugly called series. So I was honestly a reason. I don't have the math to back this up because I don't think it really exists. And if it does, it's like, well, would you really? It's on a Ewing theory type thing. But I felt more concerned in game 2 because they kept bombing away threes. And that was playing against the Knicks strategy in terms of 3-point frequency and the defense. So it was like, I'm obviously scared of Jimmy Butler, but this is also a completely different team when Butler's off the floor. And Jimmy doesn't have to do a whole lot. It's just the gravity that he has and the looks that he can create for the players who are waiting on the perimeter. But they did such a good job of passing the ball, always finding the open man. And I just think about it, it's like that, the way that the ball flies around in the half court, and even in transition too, is like when Knicks don't do that. They have some nice passing, but it is not, precise. It's just not that.
No,
Miami does a great job of it.
And I think that's more than anything why, and we're going to get to the other slices of the blame pie, because it's no secret where I get irked. I get irked when I feel that there is a disproportionate share of blame going usually towards the coach, but it's towards anyone. Whenever there's a disproportionate amount of blame going, the fact that it does usually go towards the coach is reflective of how there are fundamental pockets of distrust for a lot of the reasons that have all come back like an avalanche in the last 24 hours. It is the lack of creativity on offense. It is being outcoached by a coach who is seen as more of a 16-game coach as opposed to Thibs, who is seen as more of an 82-game coach. It is the Randle thing, and we will get into the Randle thing in terms of but again, that's how much of that is on the player and how much of that is on the guy that happens to be his coach. Like a lot, but you just nailed it, which is like you're watching this other team, which are they much less talented than us? Are they slightly less talented than us? At the very least, even having the best player in the series, I think the talent at best, if you're a Miami fan, you're going to say, okay, the talent is even. And I think there's an argument that the Knicks have more talent. Why is the team that is less talented going out there and looking so much more cohesive? And by the way, cohesive does not necessarily mean better in terms of results. Because guess who also shot 22% or barely above 20% from three yesterday? It was the Miami Heat. They didn't make a whole lot of field goals anyway, but there was something about their process that was just top to bottom. It was sound. Whereas our process was, I don't know what pejorative adjective you want to use, clunky, kind of not able to do anything that we wanted to do and doing everything the kind of the way they were dictating us to do. That's the part that I think irks most fans more than anything else.
And it's fair. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that typically the team in the playoffs, the team with the superstar wins. Usually it happens. I mean, I think superstar gets thrown around a lot. Everyone has different varying degrees. For me, it's just kind of, like a Jimmy Butler type. I think Jimmy's a superstar for sure.
Oh yeah.
And so how did Giannis go home? Because a superstar sent another superstar home. Like you look around the series right now, one of Devin Booker / Kevin Durant and Nikola Jokic is going to go home. It just, top end talent matters so much. And again, the series is still salvageable. It's been 3 games. There are 4 left to play if they need it. But still love to see the Knicks be able to rattle off the next 3. If it goes to 7, then so be it. But with that said, it's finding these opportunities to gain the exposure to the playoffs. And coaches also grow through it, but it's tricky because there was a whole thing about Thibs and adapting and it's all accurate, right? Like he gets better every year. This series has not been great. I thought they're also just the last series. I thought he did a very good job overall. There was maybe one game wasn't my favorite. Doesn't matter.
He had a great series. I thought
he did.
I thought he had a great
overall.
series.
Yes, 100%. So it's just going against a team that's so tested and everyone knows their role. And that's the thing about Miami that's so good. It's they get a star in their role and they don't really ask them to do too much. And if they do more, then that's great. But you're not going to say to Max Strus, you have to be better than what you are. It's already, you're telling me that we found a really great player and he's on a minimum contract. Like that's the sort of mindset. And for the Knicks, it's the trickier part is, okay, you're now turning Josh Hart into something he's not. It gets clunky. Everything gets stressful from there. And it just, they're younger players. Also, it feels like they've been resilient all year, but there's a team that is very battle tested and there's a team that's extremely green. And the team that's green is still tested enough where they're here for a reason. It's not a fluke that they're here. Yeah, but the other team, it's such an odd team to consider. And I should have thought about this beforehand because I felt nervous about the Cavs series and then they won. And I felt good about this series and now they're down 2-1. So maybe the confidence should have been the deciding factor for me or a tip off of some sort. But this is a team that has been to the conference finals, 2 of the last 3 years, I believe. And
they went to the finals. The 2 of the 3 years prior to this one, they have been to the conference finals. One of those years they made it to the NBA finals. Yeah.
Right. So they know how to get around this. Now is their time. The fact that they have Kyle Lowry again playing at a higher level than he was earlier this season. Like they have people chipping in. And then you see the Knicks side. It's like, well, there's room to grow, but also Immanuel Quickley is hurt. And all these other players are hurt, but they're playing. So hopefully IQ plays, but his list is doubtful. Maybe it's games and shit. Maybe it's not. I don't really know. But it's the sort of thing where you have to find a way to come together. And for a lot of these players, it just hasn't worked out in that way. And for Miami, it has. And that feels like the difference right now.
We'll get to IQ in a second with the personal injury report. But you just nailed something. And I brought it up now a few times, and I feel like I need to bring it up just once more. If you look at the collective playoff experience, not only of the Miami Heat, but of every team that is still remaining in the playoffs, and you look at where they have gone and how far they have gone and how many times they have gone there just over the 3 seasons prior to this one. And you compare, and literally 7 for 7, go through every single one of them, and you compare those 7 to the Knicks, it's night and day. And I think even if you would argue that the Knicks have more talent than the Heat, which I just said a moment ago, and I think what you just said is so smart because it keys in on how at this time of year, experience not trumps talent, but like where it's close enough, and it may not even need to be that close, but where it's like where you could see it on the horizon, it could bridge that gap so much. And if I was just thinking about this as you were talking, how many guys did the Heat, as they were winning game 3 or in any game this series, how many guys have you looked at them or how many times have you looked at them on the floor and be like, man, the Heat are really overextending that guy, or the Heat are really putting that player in a position where they're not giving that player the best chance to be successful? I mean, you go up and down, Jimmy Butler obviously runs the show. Everything revolves around Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo also does his fair share and does things. And it's deceiving too, because Bam does things in a way that it doesn't always come out in numbers. It doesn't even come out in box score stats, but he is incredibly instrumental to so much of what they do on both ends of the floor, not just on defense, to both ends of the floor, because he can handle the ball. He's a threat with the ball. He's obviously a threat with screens, hashtag legal screens. But then like Kyle Lowry, you brought up, like, is Kyle Lowry what he once was? No, of course Kyle Lowry isn't what he once was. But can that dude still come in and for 10 or 12 minutes a game while Jimmy Butler's on the bench, run a dynamite NBA offense? Well, we saw that he can, and he could do it. And then if you just have those 3 ingredients, give me a little Gabe Vincent ball handling, give me a little like Caleb Martin threat off the bounce. Like you don't need a lot more, and everybody else just fits in. Whereas with the Knicks, and I'm hearing myself talk, and this sounds like kind of an apologist, but like the pieces are not fitting as well in this series and slotting in. It's like, okay, this is your role. This is your role. This is your role. as they have during the regular season. And I think that kind of brings us back to like how this team was built and a lot of the questions coming into the postseason about, can a team that really can't shoot succeed based, in large part on their offense? And we're, I think starting to get a little bit of the answer here. Let's do Emmanuel Quickley really quick, and then we'll go back to finishing up our blame pie. So, yes, this is the return of the Weiss and Rosenblum personal injury report. Happy to have our friends at Weiss and Rosenblum back. If you think you may have a personal injury case, you could call them today at 212-366-6100 or visit them at weissandrosenblum.com for more information. You know the drill by now. You can call Weiss and Rosenblum, again, 212-366-6100. If you think you have a case, they will talk to you. They will explain everything you need explained, absolutely free of charge. Doesn't cost you a dime. Give them a ring. They'll let you know their expert opinion. And if they do decide to take your case, they, of course, do not get paid unless you do. Prior results don't guarantee future outcome. But if you need an attorney, go with a veteran, not a rookie. I guess Weiss and Rosenblum is Kyle Lowry in this analogy. Or should we make them Jimmy Butler? I don't know. I mean, either way, you're in good hands,
Yeah, you absolutely are. And
I mean, Kyle Lowry is an NBA champion. We should give him credit.
He is 100%. And he was with the Raptors for all those years, even when they weren't winning the NBA Finals.
He was their leader. I know, but again, like I bring that up as a joke. But you could also visit weissandrosenblum.com for more information. Forgot that part. I bring it up as a joke with Kyle Lowry, but like, think about the fact that dude was the best player or the most trusted player on a playoff team for half a decade. Like, that institutional knowledge. I haven't even brought up Kevin Love's name. Another guy who was like once upon a time thought of as like one of the 10 best players in the sport. Like, he's on this roster. Like, all that stuff matters. Anyway, Emmanuel Quickley, doubtful. This is doubtful for game 4. We don't know anything because the Knicks don't say anything. He sprained his ankle when, who was it? Bam landed on his ankle. Someone landed on his ankle. Whatever. Yeah. Neither here nor there. I'm just going to ask you this. 2 questions. One, and talk about a question that would have seemed absurd 3 weeks ago. How big of a loss do you think this is? And 2, if you can't go, what do you think the Knicks do?
A few weeks ago, I would have said this is a huge loss. Right now, I'm going to say it's a loss. It's a significant one. But there were times where it felt like he was starting to get his mojo back during game 3, and
so close.
And then he winds up hurting himself or getting hurt. It's just the defense is still going to be missed. It's what he does. Phenomenal defender, just exquisite. And so it's going to suck to not have that, which is why I think the Knicks will try to replicate that by bringing in Deuce McBride and giving him some of the minutes that Emmanuel Quickley would not have, or would be having. I don't know why it would be Evan Fournier. The Knicks lack primary ball handlers, and they're not going to bring in Derrick Rose at this point. So you bring in the 10th man, who is Deuce McBride. Yes, does it hurt your efficiency? It does. But you also hope that his defense hurts Miami's. It's just at a certain point where I look at Evan Fournier and I think he said one moment all year. And we're basically, it was a great moment, but we're now hoping that he replicates that in the playoffs. I'm sorry. I just don't see it, but I see Deuce McBride, the guy who has had some action, limited minutes, but at least deserving of that opportunity where you hope the shot falls, but at least his defense is going to be there. And with Evan Fournier, it doesn't feel like there is a guarantee. Yeah. I mean, still a great shot, but if he had a great shot, it would be a great shot this year. And it just hasn't been. So I don't think it's much of a conversation. I think it's got to be Deuce McBride, and you roll from there.
I think, man, you called it. You said you think it's a significant loss.
Well, no, I'm saying it's a very big loss. Don't get me wrong. It's just based on what we saw IQ at the end of the season, the regular season, versus where we've been seeing IQ in the playoffs. It doesn't feel like as big of a loss, but it's still a very big loss, right? But again, the Heat are playing without their 6th man of the year player, right? Like, so
yeah.
I'm not comparing one to the other 1-to-1. It's more just like there's they offer different things, of course, but
I'm just going to come out and say it. I think you're being kind. I think you're being kind given what we have seen. And like, I mean, anybody listening to this who doesn't think that I am a believer in Emmanuel Quickley long-term and throughout this year, like, please go look at any, like, I wrote, I think two newsletters in like a 3-week span, where they might as well have been entitled, "Hey, assholes in the front office, if you think of trading this player, you all deserve to be fired." I don't know if that was the exact verbiage, but it was something close to that. I've called him a quintessential Knick. I've called him at times the best 2-way player on the team this year.
Oh yeah.
I thought he deserved consider. I mean, again, that's like, it's
everybody I'm thinking Mitchell Robinson, but even still,
everybody has like different definitions. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do you factor like how good someone is on off? But the point is, he takes nothing off the table. Or for 82 games, he took nothing off the table. Or 81 games because missed one game. You're not going to find a bigger Emmanuel Quickley fan than me, and yet I think you're being kind by saying it's a big loss, because he is so out of sorts on the offensive end that I think it is actively detracting from when he is on the court. Now, we have not seen a ton of time with him on the court in the postseason with the prototypical closing lineup that the Knicks used for a lot of towards the end of the year after the Hart trade, which is him, Hart, Brunson, Randle, and usually Hartenstein. We saw a little bit of it in game 3. And for like a hot minute, I was like, man, yes, this is it. Okay. You're starting to get the feels back for like 3 possessions. And then it kind of went away. Perhaps not coincidentally, when Emmanuel Quickley missed some shots, because he's been doing a lot of that over the postseason. For the postseason through 8 games, he is shooting 35% from the field and 24% from 3, averaging 1 assist per game and just over 1 turnover per game. And again, this is a guy who did not turn the ball over at all during the regular season. Took incredibly good care of the ball. I'm belaboring the point, which is like, I'm not going so far as to say like this is a secretly a good thing. I can't go that far. But like, just based on how he's played, do I think the Knicks can overcome the loss of Emmanuel Quickley based on what we've seen in the last 8 games? Absolutely, I think they can. I think you nailed it with Deuce, and yet I was going to get on here and I was going to go on a rant about the idiocy of anybody who could possibly think that Evan Fournier or Derrick Rose could possibly be the answer. And yet, one of those 2 names is giving me pause. It's not Evan Fournier. Yeah. Please don't come anywhere near the court, Evan Fournier. Is it that insane?
Yes.
That insane?
Yes.
Derrick Rose? It's that insane. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I mean,
it's fair. No, listen, that's why I asked the question. I genuinely asked the question.
I know you are, and I'm trying to be kind, and at the same time, I'm trying to be kind. So
I was just very mean to Emmanuel Quickley. You could be just this mean to me.
So, Derrick Rose, since the beginning of 2023, has played under 5 minutes of basketball.
Yeah. I think he's made has he made a shot in that time?
He has not made a shot.
I know he's attempted a bunch, because every time he comes in, he starts chucking them up.
He is 0 for 8 in 4 minutes and 51 seconds.
There you go. That's my answer.
Yeah.
It's the right answer. I just did want to raise the question because, again, in a series in which we have seen a young team seemingly get a little bit unnerved by the bright lights of the moment, it's just tough because we have no idea where Derrick Rose's basketball ability is at this point, which is why, again, your response is the correct one. And it also
we do though. No, we do. We know where it is. If he were
better, he'd
good
be
enough, he'd be in the rotation.
Yeah.
It took how long for Thibs to have him removed? And by have him removed, I mean have him removed, not remove Derrick Rose from the rotation, so to speak. we know what's there. We know what we're getting. But I hear you in terms of the playoff experience, right? And the funny thing about it is Jalen Brunson has probably the most playoff experience of any Knick. Yep. And this is his third postseason, and he's 26 years old.
Yeah.
And I think also if you're looking at other, like a player like Immanuel Quickley and wondering where did his abilities go and all of that and worried about it, Jalen Brunson in his first playoff series in Dallas was removed from the rotation at times.
Yeah.
He was unplayable.
He's playing behind, oh my God, I was going to say Tyrone Lue. He was playing behind,
was it Terry?
No, it was once a Knick, always a Knick. Scored 42 points in Charlotte.
Oh, Trey Burke, yeah.
Trey Burke, thank you.
Yes. He found a way, got better, got a little older, and, Kyle Lowry, he didn't have a good playoff experience until he was 27 years old. It was the second time he ever made it. It was not great in the year after that. And then the year after that, he was fantastic.
Long term, Quickley's going to be fine.
Sure. I guess I'm going back to the conversation in terms of how much experience matters and how inexperience can still get you where you need to be.
So you do want to see Derrick Rose.
But you also have to be good enough to get those minutes. That's
no, I know. I'm being a little facetious here. At the same time, like, look, the answer is play Deuce, and maybe still go to an 8-man rotation, even with Deuce in it, because I don't know if we should talk about Obi Toppin. Not talk about the lights being a little bright for him at the moment, but. Yeah, because you want to go with what got you here, and Derrick Rose did not get you here. Like Deuce McBride helped get you here in a big way. And when he was removed from the rotation, it was not because Deuce McBride was doing anything wrong. It's because they acquired Josh Hart and they wanted to stick with the 9-man, which is fine. So I think it should be Deuce. I think Deuce deserves a chance. I just wanted to raise the question. That's all. I just wanted to hear it out loud, and now I can go back in my hole.
Good.
Okay, I did the thing that I got mad at people for doing last night, which is to bury who I would argue deserves at least as much of the blame pie, if not the lion's share. And we're talking for almost 35 minutes, and here he comes up now, and that's Julius Randle.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly.
Can I give you Julius's stats for the postseason?
I'd rather you didn't, but yes, please do.
You would rather I didn't.
I would rather you didn't, but you need to, and I'll just have to deal with it.
So, and look, we want to pay homage to what was a good game 2 against Miami. Mm-hmm. What was a good few minutes in game 5 against Cleveland before he got injured, and what was a good first half against Cleveland in game 1. Note those 3 things for the record. In 31 minutes a game in the postseason, he's averaging 15 points. He is shooting 34.6% from the field overall. That is slightly worse than Emmanuel Quickley, except Julius Randle is taking nearly twice as many shots, 15.3 shots per game. And he is shooting 22.9% from 3 on just under 7 3-point attempts per game, 3.6 assists to 3.1 turnovers. That is not what you want. From a guy that is taking let's see here. How many, in terms of field goal attempts per game, where do you think Julius ranks in the NBA this postseason?
Decently. Oh man.
Like in terms of his number of field goal attempts per game.
Is it? It can't. I feel like it's not that high.
It's kind of it's 30th. That's where his 15.3 field goal attempts per game ranks. One spot below Joel Embiid taking 15.5 field goal attempts per game. It's a lot. I mean, look, the point is he's taking a lot of shots and he's missing a lot of shots. And and he's been doing that the whole postseason. And I think we've been collectively, taking it easy on him because the other stuff hasn't been there. Well, game 3, the other stuff got there, and it was just I'm losing the words. Do you have words for Julius, Jeremy?
Just the lack of process throughout the entire game on both sides of the floor. Just felt so choppy and uneven. I'll say this though, what I was pleased about, there was what turned out to be much ado about nothing, where there was a fear of what happens when the other team tries to get under Julius Randle's skin.
Yep.
And then Julius gets mad and Cody Zeller pushed him to the ground. Julius's reaction was not to stand up and then charge at him.
Nope.
It was a much more subdued Julius, which is an important part of it. You still have to back it up. He's not been able to back it up. And that's the challenge, where you get someone who has taken you so far, right, with other cast members as well, but he's just not getting you there. He's not going toe to toe with the superstar. It's not happening. And you don't need him to do it, but you need him to at least get to a point where you don't feel that he's a liability on either end. And yet at the same time, it felt like how many other players were a liability for the Knicks on the offensive end? They were
on the offensive end,
3rd percent. Yeah. Well, on the offensive end, there was some effort, but they were 3rd percentile, I believe, of an offense in game 3. But just on the defensive side, the problems are well known. They're not going to get significantly better, although we certainly saw in the We Hear year that Julius was a phenomenal defender. It's just, this will always, and this is a conversation for another time, but the thought I had was when the Knicks brought in Jalen Brunson, they said, we know that we're bringing in someone where you have to scheme around him defensively. And that means you need to then have a unit that's more cohesive that can cover for him. And yet I feel like you could say similar about Julius in that he's not nearly small. I mean, my God, he's enormous. It's just the process and the ability on the defensive end, where if it's all kinetic, if he's not processing and you also got an area of weakness elsewhere on the defensive end, it's just everything's out of whack. And it's just always going to be the trouble with Julius. Like that's simply what it's going to be. You just hope that he can find those games within him to say, all right, I just have to be competent on defense, and the offense, I just need to be efficient.
Well, just try, because
it's
like
game
that,
one.
How often have we said that?
Yeah. What was it? It was game 1 or game 3 of the first round where Julius just wasn't it. And yet you look at, I think it was game 3. You look at the stat line, you're like, wow, it didn't seem like that was a problem. And then I believe it was game 4 where the effort was not there, but the same or similar stat lines were there. It was like, yeah, that's the difference between a good game or good process, bad game, and bad process, bad game. And
as it always is with Julius, you always, and now with an injury thrown in, it's like, do we attribute it to the injury? Do we attribute it to, he's just not feeling it tonight? Like, is
everyone's playing hurt? Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm not saying it as a valid excuse. It's just we always come back to the same shit where we have to have the same discussion over and over again where Julius Randle is concerned. And that is why, I do have sympathy for people who, even after all he has accomplished for this franchise, and God knows he's accomplished a lot for this franchise in the 4 years that he has been here, to see a game like that, much in the same way, I think a lot of people saw that game and were like, this is why I'm done. I'm cool with if they move on from Thibs, despite all that he's done with us. I think there's probably a lot of people that feel the same way about Julius. Again, despite the fact that he's been an instrumental part of a team that is now in the second round of the playoffs, and like they're not here without him. But when you get that sort of a game to that degree, and it seems that blatant in spots, it's now, listen, come back tomorrow and erase it from everybody's memory. He's capable of doing that. We've seen him do it before. Is he going to do it now? I don't know. We have several other contenders for the rest of the blame pie before we just finish up with some quick, predictions for the rest of the series. I don't know. Maybe we could each pick one thing to go with here. Some things that Andrew has written down here. Mitchell Robinson, nowhere near as dominant or as impactful as he was versus Cleveland. Grouped together here, the trio of Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, and Obi Toppin. Just none of them have made themselves very effective. You already brought up the Miami Heat, just kind of tipping your cap to the Heat playing well. And Andrew notes this might be unfair because he's largely played well, even though he is 0 for 12 from 3. Jalen Brunson. I just want to say for the record, Jalen Brunson did not have a great game in game 3, but and some of that is on him. But also, like you were talking about, like Jimmy Butler and how Jimmy Butler gets to, the Heat make the offense work really well around Jimmy. In the first quarter alone, against Miami in game 3, Jalen Brunson was there taking 3 long twos. Now, he can make those long twos. He has made a lot of those long twos this year. He's very good from that range. But it was very poor process that got to that point. Now, how much you want to put that on the coaching? How much do you want to put that on Brunson himself? But I'm not putting any blame on Brunson. I'm gonna go with Mitch, and maybe that's a little unfair. But maybe it's because he raised his own expectations so high after the Cleveland series. But just for me personally, I don't think I've been underwhelmed by anyone in this series more than Mitchell Robinson. He, it's not that some number. I mean, he has 12 offensive rebounds in 3 games. It's not like he has nothing. He's 2 blocks though. Again, blocks aren't everything. You can protect the rim. Oftentimes, you're going to get very few blocks if you protect the rim adequately because no one wants to shoot anytime you're near the rim. That is not the case in this series though. It's just. He's just has not been the same, as Andrew wrote. He has not been the same presence. If there's another guy that is going to get my personal piece of the blame pie, I'm going to go with Mitch.
Yeah, and again, we just talked about injuries. Not everyone's hurt, but I do wonder how much of his hip is impacting his game because he just hasn't looked the same since that. And at game 2, it seemed like he was kind of laboring as well at a certain moment where I think there was some impact there too. It might have, I don't want to say re-aggravated, but it certainly impacted the area that
he might be playing hurt.
And because he was just so dominant. And yeah, you're saying the boards, it's there, but I don't know. It's if
on
I had
defense
to say
in particular, I think is where the drop off has been more noticeable for me.
Oh yeah, I mean I have it here. It's just the sheer amount of frequency of shots that the Heat took at the rim in game 3 compared to games 1 and 2 is staggering, right? Yep. Game 2, you can understand because they mostly shot from 3 because they didn't have Jim Butler and the paint wasn't collapsing as much. Game 1, the frequency was 47% or 47th percentile. Game 2, it was 41st, and game 3 it was 83rd. So the Heat recognized, let's just cut to the basket. And it worked for them. So yeah, I hear you in terms of Mitch, and I feel bad about this player because I don't think that they deserve to be called out in the way that it sounds like I'm calling them out because we just talked about however many players ahead of them where I would be upset. But it's difficult when you're not getting meaningful production behind Randle when Randle's already struggling. Yeah. And that's what happens with Obi. I mean, the Knicks they care a lot about having corner threes, right? That's off ball movement shooting. It's it's a poorly efficient team that is relying on someone to get the easy looks. And Obi is often able to stand there. And the funny thing is in the playoffs, I mean, he's done well at the corner, but in general, he takes a lot of corner threes and historically doesn't really hit them. And it's hard when everyone is not hitting their shots. Again, it was difficult because I didn't want to call RJ for not hitting his shots because other players aren't doing it. I feel the same way about Obi. It's just as a unit, it's not falling for so many of them, but it's harder when the player that's there isn't the most efficient one to begin with. And you're asking them to hit shots you love them to take. Again, in the playoffs, he's done a nice job of that. Don't get me wrong. It's harder when he's not efficient, when he's not able to just play off in the way that we would hope for. So again, the players that are well ahead of him in terms of the blame pie, but I think Obi has to get the call out for this one.
In this series, RJ Barrett is 8 of 21 from 3. He's by far the Knicks' leading 3-point shooter in this series, 38%. And Obi is next at 29% of 5 of 17. For the postseason as a whole, Obi shooting a little bit better. 11 of 34 from three for 32.4%. That's second best behind Josh Hart and a little bit ahead of Barrett, again, for the playoffs as a whole. But again, I would just note the degree of difficulty on those shots is Cleveland gave them those shots. Miami's giving them those shots. They're open. You got to hit open catch and shoot threes at a higher clip than that. I don't think that's a bad pick at all. Okay, let's finish up with this. And I look, everybody knows the X's and O's at this point in the series. Everybody knows what happened in Game 3. Everybody knows what happened in Game 1, Game 2. As Thibs said before the series, he knows who we are. We know who they are. Let's go. Hasn't worked out so well. What is? I don't know if you want to phrase it. What needs to happen for the Knicks to win Game 4? I have a couple ideas, but I'll turn to you first.
Sure. I'd love to see Quentin Grimes get back into the starting lineup. That'd be a nice start. In addition to that, again, it's just I feel as though this is a team that has beat Miami 3 times in the regular season, and Miami is now actively worse than they were those times where the Knicks won, because they're missing at least one key player, and also Victor Oladipo, who played a role but was not nearly as good as Tyler Hero. Just go back to the game that you're designed at. You know how to guard Jimmy Butler. You don't have to keep sending help. You don't have to make it so you leave all these shooters who are available on the perimeter who can hit those shots. And if they can't hit that shot, you know who's probably going to? The guy that they just whipped that pass to, who the Knicks aren't even covering above the break or in the corner. Or it's back to the guy above the break because it was just in the corner. It's really the processing and giving a shit, so to speak, right? Like that is more of the mantra. And I would like to think that you got your ass handed to you in Game 2. You came back, you had a nice Game 3. Okay. Game 3 did not go well at all. Terrible game, but throw in the trash. It would have been a loss, whether it was by 1 point or by 40 points. So you start fresh and you just have to win one in Miami and then you protect New York. That's just how it goes. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well, and if there's overlap or anything different.
Yeah, I would just say I do think it's worth noting playoffs are a different animal, and as a playoff seasoned veteran team, all the things we talked about earlier, for as much as whereas on the roster wise, they're not the same team that the Knicks beat 3 out of 4 times in the regular season in terms of a level of preparedness, preparation, them coming with the requisite attitude. Like if Miami was this, even with this roster, and they had prepared and played like this for the regular season, they would not have been a 7th seed. So I want to throw that out there. Otherwise, I don't disagree with anything you said. What it comes down to me for me, Jeremy, is like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's the first possession of the game. What is the shot that I want the Knicks to get? And how do I want them to get that shot? And then it comes back to, okay, who am I confident shooting the ball right now? And right now, after that game, you really don't have confidence in anybody shooting the ball. But throughout the playoffs, I feel like you have confidence in Jalen Brunson with the ball in his hands, Jalen Brunson making things happen, Jalen Brunson starting to knock over the dominoes, but doing it on his terms. Okay. So how do you get back to Jalen Brunson trying to do things on his terms? Well, obviously you try to give him more space to work. Now, I think, as you said, and as everybody has said for the last, 24, 48, 72, however many hours, moving Quentin Grimes back in the starting lineup is something that could be, and it seems obvious. I wonder if there isn't a slightly more drastic change, and that is, instead of moving Josh Hart to the bench, maybe moving RJ Barrett to the bench. Now, as I say that, I know, for one, it's not going to happen. Number 2, I don't even know that it should happen. But the reason, and 3, RJ Barrett's been the second best Knick in the playoffs, and give or take a Mitchell Robinson because of how good Mitchell Robinson was in the Cavs series, I'll still give RJ Barrett the edge. I think RJ Barrett's been the second best Knick in the playoffs after Jalen Brunson. However, in this iteration of the starting lineup, if you want Josh Hart out there for the reasons you want Josh Hart out there, and unlike a lot of people, I do think that there is merit to wanting Josh Hart out there with the starting lineup, even though I don't think they operated well with him out there in game 3, and I don't think they got the most out of him. Replacing RJ with someone who is a better perimeter defender and a more aware perimeter defender, and obviously someone who is a better shooter and I think a quick decision maker, just someone who gives a little bit of a jolt to the offense. I think that would help. I don't think, as Benji said, I'll steal Benji's line from a text he sent earlier today. It's not the silver bullet, but it is a bullet. Specifically moving Grimes into the starting lineup, I don't think he wants to sit RJ. I don't think anybody other than me would want to sit RJ. But it's just a thought that I had, and I just wonder, okay, maybe you don't go out there with RJ on the bench, but maybe you move, it's a quick hook, and bring in Grimes for him or Hart for him if you go back to Grimes in the starting lineup, whatever. It's just the current starting lineup is not working, and I think that's another change that they could use. And then, again, I feel bad saying this because I still believe in him as an NBA player. I still believe in him potentially as a very useful, good NBA player in a significant role. I think I'm done with Obi for this postseason, or at least for this series. Let me rephrase that. For this series, I think we've seen enough of Obi in this series. And if Quickley's out, play Deuce, go with an 8-man rotation, and bring absolute hellfire on defense for you should do it for the whole game, but especially when Deuce McBride is out there. Like, that is something that he gives you that nobody else on the roster gives you. And take it to them. Try to force some turnovers. Try to force some splash plays. Try to get yourself some easy buckets that way, because the Knicks have not gotten a lot of that in this series. So those are two things that I would do. But again, it really just comes down to what are the play calls that you are making to try to get Jalen Brunson in spaces and where he can not have to make life so difficult on himself to make shots. And that's X's and O's stuff. And like, I'm not going to try to sit here and fucking pretend I know the best methods of that, but I do know that there are ways to go about doing that, because we have seen them in all sorts of different lineup iterations. And then the last thing I would just say, and this is it, is like, RJ said something after the last game, after game 3, where he's like, I don't care who's in front of me, whether it's Bam, whether it's Jimmy, I'm going to have the same approach. This is not the series to have that mentality. And I mean that for RJ, and I mean that for Julius. And I mean that for Jalen Brunson too. Although Jalen Brunson, I don't think has done it as much. It's mostly been Julius and a little bit RJ, where the Heat have 2 all-world caliber defenders. And then you want to say Gabe Vincent's feisty? Okay. They have 2 all-world caliber defenders and a bunch of defenders who are either not good, bad, or like maybe top out as okay. Figure out a way to go at those other guys. Like, that is how you are going to win the series, and that is not what you have done at all. And I don't want to hear. I'm tired of seeing possessions end where someone goes at either a Bam Adebayo or a Jimmy Butler. That is not where your bread is going to be buttered in this series. And we saw it enough in game 3 for my disliking. Fix that. Again, don't put, that's playing into their hands. That's all I really got.
I wouldn't take Obi out just based on the fact you're talking about trying to get those easy points, but Obi leaking out in transition is a way to get those easy points.
There's a flip side to that coin, which is leaking out too early, which he's done a few times.
Sure, also, of course, but it's still, at least that's more effort than I feel like a lot of the other players have shown.
But you want your it has to be sound effort. We're talking about execution, right? It has to be sound effort too. Like, just misplaced effort is almost in some ways worse than no effort. Well, maybe not, but like, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. But then if you take him out of the series, you're relying more heavily on Randle, which then puts more stress on him to play well. I mean,
I'll take my chances going small when Randle's on the bench. I'll take my chances.
I get it. I understand, but I just wouldn't take Obi out entirely.
It's it's radical, but both. I mean, obviously, the first thing I proposed is very radical, and that's radical in its own right. So I don't know. How about this? Play better. That's my suggestion. Play better. Get it back to a game. Get it back to a game 5. All's forgiven. 2-2. And then that's all you need to do. Jeremy, it's been fun as always. Everybody out there, thanks for checking out another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Don't forget, leave a rating if you dig the show. Obviously, if you're kind enough to leave a review, do that as well. We appreciate those. And we will be back with you with more fun and games very soon. Peace out.